Howdy, we're going to go through the third topic in Unit 8B, the Trig unit, and we'll start out with a little warm-up activity. So this first problem says find the value of x. I've been given this angle. So relative to that angle, this is the opposite side. This is the hypotenuse. This is the adjacent side. So since I've got opposite and hypotenuse, that's the sine of 42, SOHCAHTOA, the opposite and hypotenuse, is x over 9. So I'll multiply both sides by 9. And I'll work this out on my calculator. As a reminder, you want to check and make sure your calculator is in degrees. So if you press mode, just make sure it says degrees right there. And then I'm good to go. So I press second quit to get back to the home screen. 9 sine of 42, not with a plus, gives me 6.0. Number 2, Max is building a skateboard ramp 16 inches high. So this is 16. The angle is a 21-degree angle with the ground. The height is the right angle, of course. What's the length of the ramp? So I'm trying to figure out how long that ramp is. So relative to the 21 degrees, this is the opposite adjacent hypotenuse. Again, I've got the opposite and the hypotenuse. So I've got the sine of 21 equals the opposite over the hypotenuse. So that's going to tell me x sine 21 is 16, or x equals 16 over the sine of 21. So on my calculator, I go 16 divided by the sine of 21, 44.6. The topic today is to find missing angles of a triangle using trig. And you can flip back in your book to the beginning of this day's topic. Again, of course, as I said, make sure your calculator is in degree mode. And we first want to find these things here. So we will use our calculators for this. And it's a little bit different. If you'll notice, now I don't know what the angle is. And I'm trying to find the angle. So what I'm going to do is use, maybe you can see this right here. I'm going to see if I can blow it up. Hang on. All right, I use the snipping tool here. And let's get me a new page. And I've just snipped a picture of that. And you can see right here above the sign is something that says sine to the -1. That's the inverse sign. It's kind of like doing the opposite of sine. Just like we have squares and square roots, and those are sort of opposites or undo each other. Sine and inverse sine, as well as cosine and inverse cosine, tangent and inverse tangent, those things all undo each other. So here's what I'm going to do. To find the sine of this, to find the angle whose sine gives me this, I'm going to press second sine, that gives me that little inverse sign, and type in that number, 7245. That gives me 46.43. If I have an angle that's got 46.43 degrees, the sine of that is going to be 0.7245. So the second one, I'm going to go second cosine of 0.1045, and I get this. This is about an 84-degree angle. And likewise, the inverse tangent of 0.4279 gives me 23.2. When you round, I want you to round properly, but I don't, unless you're given specific instructions, I don't care right now exactly how many digits you take it to. So let's see if we can find the missing numbers here. Label these parts. figure out what we need to find and use the correct inverse function. So I'm actually finding missing angles here. And I've got this angle. So relative to that, this is the opposite, this is the adjacent, this is the hypotenuse. So since I've got adjacent and opposite here, I'm going to use the tangent of x equals opposite over adjacent. So in my calculator, I'm actually writing inverse tangent of 9/20ths, and that'll give me x. So on my calculator, it's the inverse tangent of 9/20ths, 22.2. Sorry, 24.2. All right, how about this one? Here's my angle. So this side is opposite, this side is adjacent, and since this is opposite of the right angle, that's the hypotenuse. So I've got adjacent and hypotenuse. That's the cosine of x equals 17 over 32. So if I take the inverse cosine of 17 over 32, that gives me x. Inverse cosine, 17 over 32, 57.9. All right, how about number 3? Here's my angle. So I've got opposite and adjacent along with a hypotenuse. So I've got the opposite and adjacent. That's the tangent of x is 13 over 18. So the inverse tangent of 13/18 is x. The inverse tangent, 13/18, 35.8. All right, let's go with one more. This guy here. Relative to this angle, I've got opposite, adjacent, hypotenuse. Opposite and hypotenuse. That's the sine of x is the opposite over the hypotenuse. So the inverse sine of 21 over 28 is x. So the inverse sine of 21 over 28, 48.6. 48.6. So let's see if you guys can give this a shot on your assignment. And as always, contact your teacher if you need some help. Good luck.